Welcome to The Artist Matters. I'm Alex Rudy, and each week you will meet incredible artists from all walks of life. Filmmakers, writers, actors, painters, musicians, and so many more, sharing their stories to motivate and inspire the creative in you. Whether you're doing it for fun or looking to make a living, this show will help you on your journey to bring out the artist within and letting the world know that your art matters. Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of The Artist Matters. I'm your host, Alex Rudy, and today's guest is my first ever ceramic pottery artist, Dean McRaine. I found Dean through a Facebook group that showed a video of him making colored clay into all kinds of shapes, turtles, flowers, all these amazing designs on pottery such as a vase or a plate, mugs, of course. It blew my mind. I couldn't understand how he made all these shapes on both sides of the clay into these beautiful pieces of art. There's no question. It is an art. It is a very intricate and disciplined art, as you will soon hear in his story, which goes back to the late 60s, early 70s, where he just took it up as a hobby to kind of get his mind off his practice of family therapy. And it just kind of blossomed from there. He taught himself a lot. He didn't take any formal training. He just took some books, information, and from there he just evolved into his own business, which is Lightwave Pottery, based in Kauai. That's right, he's out there in the Hawaiian Islands. And from there he evolved into his own business, and this whole colored clay thing is something that practically nobody else is doing. So he is a pioneer in that regard. And I'm telling you, you've got to check out this video of him making the clay and his website. The pieces are incredible. What I find most endearing about him is that he took what he learned in family therapy and he's been applying it to his ceramics and pottery as a way of bringing a little more happiness into someone's life. And I hope you keep that in mind as you listen to his interview, because as an artist, that is probably one of the greatest rewards, knowing that what we create touches people's lives, brings them a little hope, a little joy, makes them feel something, an emotional connection. Without further ado, let's get into this. Here is my interview with Dean McRaine. All right, we've got Dean on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming along here. So let's get into it. Where did your journey begin?
I grew up in Southern California and left as soon as I could, never went back.
Interesting. Did you always have this creative spark in you?
I've always made stuff. I was making stuff when I was 4 years old.
Like what? What kind of thing?
I worked with my hands in a bunch of different ways. I built guitars for a while. I built houses for a while. I've done various arts and crafts. I always make stuff.
And this is when you were a young kid?
Through my 20s, I went to school in psychology. Ultimately, although I did do a short stint at Stanford in the product design department, which is kind of ironic because I dropped out to study sex and drugs and rock and roll, which is a very common major in those days. That was 1970, 69, 70, I think. And the academic thing just didn't work for me. And so I dropped out for a couple of years and thought about what I wanted to do. And when I came back, I studied psychology and got a license to practice family therapy. And I practiced family therapy for about 20 years, more or less. And during that time, I started doing ceramics as a sort of a stress reliever, and also because I always make stuff. So I got into it then and never quit.
So how did you get into it? I think you said on your bio that pottery kind of found you. Explain that.
Okay. I got into I don't know why I did, but I got into a adult ed ceramics class at College of Marin. And I think I took 2 classes there, and I learned nothing. I walked in the door of that class, and there was one of the TAs standing by the door, and I literally had 1 foot in the room, my first pottery class, and he pulls me aside and he says, "Don't talk to the teacher." And I'm like, "What?" And he says, "Don't talk to the teacher. You'll understand." And so I kind of Googled it and, checked out what was going on. The teacher was sick, alcoholic, and tenured. And he never taught a single word in that class. The only thing I learned in that class was I learned the rudiments of how to throw pottery on the wheel from the TA, but mostly we got nothing. And so I got into throwing on the wheel, and I went in there 2-3 nights a week for a couple of semesters. And one day I went in there and I was in the zone. I was like, this is my Zen moment. I am doing this. And I threw 5 or 6 of the best pieces that I ever made. I'm sure they look terrible to me now, but I thought they were red hot, and they just flowed, Throwing on the wheel takes a while to master. And I've been struggling, and I threw these bowls, and I thought they were super cool. And when I came back to the next class, 2 of them had gotten broken by other students.
Oh, no.
Pottery is very fragile.
Yes.
When it's greenware, it's like a heavy soda cracker, and you can just snap it in your hand. So, but I took it as a message from Spirit, I would say now. I took it as a message that I was done there. So I quit the class after that. I mean, it hurt. When you make something and it gets broken accidentally, that hurts.
It's devastating.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't have much in the bank at that point. I was a total beginner. So, I saw my best babies getting killed there, and I was out of there. So I set up a studio in the house that I was renting at the time, and I had virtually zero knowledge. And pottery is a hard craft to learn because there's so many aspects. There's clay behavior, there's form and shaping, there's types of clay, there's how clay behaves, how it shrinks, there's firing techniques, there's glaze. The chemistry of glazing it makes no sense at all, and you have to just learn it piece by piece and by experience, and it takes years and years to master that. And I'd never even looked at how to make a glaze. So I buy this kiln, and this little gas kiln. I move in there, and I make a load of stuff and stick it in the kiln, turn it on, and walk away. And I was sitting in my room, which was right next to where my kiln was, and the kiln's, it's gas, and it's roaring away outside. And I hear this sound that sounds kind of like,
oh no,
like that. And I never heard that sound before. And I'm like, what's that? I don't know. It's not very loud. It's, kind of a slow kind of sound. It goes on for a while, like 15 minutes or something. Keeps going. So I go out to check the kiln. I go out there and I look in, and there's nothing but debris.
Oh.
The biggest piece was a quarter size thing. It was completely wrecked. So that was one of my early lessons. So I got books. I've been pretty much self-taught ever since. I didn't quit. That's a message that I have for all the aspiring artists out there is, if you want to be an artist, you got to be the last man standing, never quit. And so I went from there, and I always had a studio wherever I was living that I would, make stuff. And for years, I just gave it away to everybody. I gave it to my friends and my family, and anybody did me a good turn, I'd give them a piece of pottery and so on. Eventually, I segued into selling my stuff at like small time, flea markets and craft fairs and stuff like that. And I mean, the only way to learn pottery is to do it a lot. You can study it and you can learn some of the technology and stuff, but the only real teacher is experience, because it's so complicated. You change one thing and something's completely different. You change, if you change a chemical in a glaze by 5%, you could have a completely different result. You might have a great result and then have a lousy one. Like, just shut me up if you want to ask another question.
Right.
We call it a talking story in Hawaii. This is talking story, right? So this one time when I was in Hawaii, after I'd been professional for a while and I wasn't doing family therapy anymore, I hooked up with these guys who were doing gift baskets for conferences. There's a lot of big corporations and stuff that have like their big conference in Hawaii, and they make these gift baskets, and very often they have local products in them. And he got onto me, and I made a deal with him to produce these vases that were very Hawaiian. They looked like lava or something. And so I just moved into a new studio. I moved from the east side to the North Shore, and I had this big order, which at the time was enormous for me. I was like, I don't know, 40 or 50 pieces or something like that.
For one order? Wow.
Yeah, because he would do these conferences, and there would be like, sometimes hundreds of people there. But he'd make these gift baskets. So I had this special glaze that I was using to glaze these, and it had this look that was killer. It was just so cool. And I was carving Hawaiian petroglyphs on them and stuff.
Wow.
They were bitching. They were great. So I know nobody says that anymore, but
hey, it's a great word.
So I've been making these for a while. I've been making them for years. That was sort of my bread and butter thing. I sold a lot of them, and so I make up a batch of this stuff. I have a whole kiln load of it, which at the time was I don't know. I think it was his whole order. Wow. I made them up. I did the first firing. You do 2 firings. I did the first firing. I glazed them. I put them in for the glaze firing, and I fired the kiln. I opened it up, and they looked like crap. They looked terrible. They didn't look anything like what it's supposed to look like. And I went crazy. This guy, I'm on the deadline. This guy's waiting for this stuff. The conference is coming. I made another whole load, tried different things, did testing on the glaze, did all this stuff, did it again, same thing happened. I had no clue. I was absolutely nuts. And it took me, and then I lost the order. I had to call him and say I can't do it. And he was hung out to dry because he was counting on me. So that was the last order I ever got from him. And it took me a while before I figured out, I don't consider myself a great artist, but I'm a good problem solver, and you better be a good problem solver if you're going to be a ceramic artist, because there's a million problems. So I finally figured out that when I moved from the east side of Kauai to the north shore of Kauai, I was in a different part of the water distribution on the island. We got our water from a different reservoir, and the chemistry of the water